There is nothing like adding value to everything and everyone around you. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Neota Igbe.
Indeed, it's always very good to add value to those around you. You have the quotable quotes guy here. You have the accurate timekeeper in Lagos. Amaokwe Ogun Yusuf, welcome to the program.
Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
I've told you, Neota, write a book. Good morning and welcome. It's May 16. It's a Tuesday morning, and we're inching closer to Children's Day. Welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde. And of course, this morning, don't worry, we'll come back to you. I know you want to have a second feed a second hit at me, but let me just take us straight to the papers this morning. Dr. Abimbola Oyarinu joins us this morning to look at the papers. He's a researcher with the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies in the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Well, perhaps the biggest news in town today is Hilda, but it's represented on the front pages of some of the papers. Let's begin with the Guardian newspaper. The biggest story on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning is uncertainty over $2.3 billion Siemens deal as grid collapses 99th time under Buhari. That story is on page 6 of the paper this morning. And, you know, a number of people have actually been asking, what happened to the Siemens deal? I remember it's a G2G kind of arrangement, and then here we are, how many years after?
Well, people only get the government they deserve. I guess this is what we deserve as Nigerians because we keep recycling the kind of people who have squandered our Commonwealth. You remember that during the Obasanjo regime, over $16 billion was expended on power. I would not think much of those who are in charge. I would say the structure we currently operate has allowed this to happen. What do I mean? The current system where there's no accountability, we don't hold our leaders to any form of, there's no reasonable result that we hold them to. The bar is so low and they keep winning elections. So how do you tell them that we do not deserve what they're currently giving us? But beyond all of this, nobody runs the power sector the way we run it and expect any reasonable result. A system where, you know, people can afford to hold the energy generating company over trillions of naira. How do they function? How do they manage the grid? And how can we attract investors into the sector? Currently, the sector, they've been able to find a way to stabilize by actually, you know, creating a structure that eventually work on the long run. But what we currently have will continue to get this kind of result, except, of course, the energy sector starts to attract the kind of money that it deserves and the kind of people that needs to.
Well, you know, the energy sector is quite large. This is just the power sector, you know, within the entire energy ecosystem. And one is wondering, I mean, you talked about the 16 billion plus dollars of the Obasanjo era, which ended 2007. But here we are now. Even the Siemens, I think the Siemens arrangement came under the Jonathan administration. I'm not quite sure. Okay, so here we are now, and we've been having this collapse. So what could be stalling this? Is it a function of what government has done, or what because I mean, government is not the one that is going to do it. Government is literally guaranteeing the private sector practitioners in these two countries. So what could be the drop?
You see, when you have a system where you have to pay your way to get a deal, you become accountable to yourself and not the people you're working for.
Okay. I think you're saying a lot without saying so much. But then, of course, as I mentioned, that Hilda story is right there on the front page. Buhari Lawan hail Hilda on world record feat. Story is on page 2. How does that come across to you? Everyone is hailing, even though the Guinness Book of World Records is still saying we need to review some things.
Well, this is one of the few good news that we have seen coming out of Nigeria, and gradually we are becoming the entertainment hub of the world. This is good for us, it's good for our public image, and I believe Ida has done herself and her family proud. A lot of people have tried to make it look easy, what she achieved. But I would say it's not sleeping for 4 days, standing on your feet.
Let them stand and cook for 4 hours.
If it's easy, everyone should be doing it.
Let them stand and cook for 4 hours first.
I will see.
That's the Guardian newspaper.
Oh, well, Nigerians have gone ahead by themselves to put Hilda in their own, in the Guinness Book of Records. So they're not waiting for Guinness right now. Okay, let's look at other stories as we turn to the front page of This Nigeria. And This Nigeria leads with that story that broke yesterday. Don't come to Nigeria. United States of America. Look at the riders. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken announces visa restriction on Nigerians who undermine 2023 electoral process as police launch manhunt for politicians over plots to derail inauguration. You know, as my colleague Hardy always says, the elections might have come, but they have certainly not gone. And this is reminiscent, of even the letter by, the award-winning author to President Joe Biden some months, weeks after the election, about the hypocrisy of the United States. And so we see this one now. The United States is saying that they've slammed visa restrictions on Nigerians who manipulated the electoral process. But then again, we're not seeing these individuals. They are not named. Is it reminiscent of the demand for accountability and a little more honesty by the United States of America, that it should live up to its billing in committing to democracy, not just in words but in action?
Well, the United States is a country that understands international relations. They only go where their interest is protected. I think it suits them.
When you put it like that, it sounds...
because it suits them now to actually call names, to actually ban these people. I think it suits American interest because they are considered the global police for democracy. But when you look at cases of, what is happening with democracy in Egypt and America's position, you then start to ask the question, why the double standard? But this is Nigeria, and they have come to say the United States will not welcome election riggers, people who have stampede democracy and all of that. It's a welcome development, but I still think that more needs to be done. They need to speak in definite terms, and also if these people, try to parade themselves in future, they should be called out. So I think America should start to name names and call these people out, basically.
Let's look at other stories now. At the bottom strip, 10th National Assembly North Central governors reject APC zoning to meet with Tinubu. Region senators-elect insist on deputy Senate president. Now it looks like, that aspect of our politicking where ethnicity and religion, colors the objectives and of course the outcomes will never go away in a hurry, and it's repeating itself this time around. It's as if those aspirants are not letting up in insisting that they will also, partake in the process. How do you see this playing out in just a matter of days?
Well, in Nigeria, when a candidate is publicized as the ordained candidate, you can tell that sometimes it doesn't go that way. I believe the party supremacy should be respected. It's unfortunate that we're where we are, where religion and ethnicity determines who gets what and how. but politicians have come to use these appendages, to their interest. You see politicians parading themselves like they represent a whole region when they are not even popular at home. This is the reality, and I think that the APC is right to actually consider some of these things, because we are an heterogeneous society, and these things must be factored in to keep the system stable, because they are the ones who champion this ideology when it suits them. So it has become part of us, and the common man on the street will not understand, for example, when you have the top 4 citizens of the country coming from a particular religion. He starts to promote some kind of phobia, which I think must be considered and factored before they take any decision.
So I wonder what the decisions would be. Would it be region, or would it be electoral gains, as has been, touted? Let's leave it there for this Nigeria and head to Abuja.
Thank you, Bukola. And we stick up with Leadership newspaper. 2 stories, basically. First, the one above the nameplate, the Hilda Bassi story. I mean, all Nigerians are excited about that. But see this, and then let's talk about what leadership can do, what every leader can learn to do from this one. She said, I almost gave up 6 hours into the contest, Linda Bassi speaks. See the writers. She's a product of resilience, hard work coming from her family. I give God all the glory, says excited mom. PMB Oshibajo, others celebrate as Chef Bassi hits 100 hours, makes Guinness World Record. That story continues on page 7. But let's talk about this. I almost gave up 6 hours into the contest. What does that speak of the leadership qualities in that young lady and other youth, and indeed Nigerians, that they can borrow from?
Interestingly, I saw one of her videos on social media where she claimed to have lost serious weight coming from a lot of discipline, losing over 20 kg in a space of 2 years. I'm currently working on my own weight loss exercise, and I can tell you that she's extremely resilient, because I have not dropped more than 2 kg since I started the journey.
Interesting. Interesting where you took it to. But let's see this other one coming from Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Says, 2 governors-elect says, avoid debts, pay salaries, or fail. Okonjo-Iweala tells governors, that's on page 4. Perform or be voted out. PMB tells governors-elect, let your successors be. Saraki Aliyu Dankwambo caution. Now, let's see what about avoiding debts, pay salaries, or fail. Okonjo-Iweala tells the governors. Is that good advice? Would you consider that very sound?
Of course, that's how any reasonable country should run. I mean, that's at the macro level. When we look at it at the micro level, as an individual, if you choose to always borrow money, one day you would come home and you won't find your properties, because definitely those who you hold will come for you. So that's the story of Nigeria. And I believe if we have to avoid debt, how do we even start when we don't produce anything? Our oil is not worth much anymore. I recently read that we are not even the top producer in Africa anymore. That's Angola now. So the point is, what are we doing to avoid that? I don't think we're doing anything currently. But I believe 2023 onward, we will start to see a difference in governance. Not because our group of politicians have chosen to change or they've given their life to Christ, as it were. But what I think has happened is that there's a third force, a worthy opposition, lurking in the corners. And that helps to spur or bring out the ingenuity in people and helps them to perform. And this has always been my argument, that we need a strong opposition that's actually capable of gaining power from the ruling party. And when they recognize that, it will spur them to action.
Okay, let's take a look at Daily Trust newspapers now. Has this NNPC to resume oil search in Lake Chad next week. That's attributed to Kiari. Imagine that's the general group managing director of the NNPC. That's what you find on the front page of Daily Trust. Open shares for public next year. Our gas pipeline to connect over 11 countries, Europe. That's the lead story on the front page of Daily Trust. They also have, well, you can comment on that, but I want you to also look at this. I mean, let me know whether you'll be buying shares in NNPC when eventually they go public. But take a look at this. Resident doctors to begin 5-day warning strike tomorrow. We also heard the Minister of Labour dissociating the federal government from the bill currently in the National Assembly, seeking to bond governors for, doctors for 5 years after they've finished their studies, making sure that they can travel. What are your thoughts on this as well, even as NARD is threatening to go on strike tomorrow?
Seasoned doctors, as it were, because I believe this is more or less like kidnapping. Compelling them to stay it's not a popular opinion, but I think it is the way to go, but not the way they are going about it. We can institute sort of a loan system where, because currently the university system that we currently operate is not sustainable, where students can come into the university on government loans. And if you want to leave the country, you have to pay the loan back. It should not be applicable to doctors alone. It should cut across. Because what we currently experience is that the state trains you over time and you just up and leave, contributing your quota to another economy rather than the economy that has trained you. That is a total waste. So instead of compelling them and gagging them to stay, why don't we institute a loan system where if you don't pay the loan, you're not leaving, basically.
Well, that's definitely one way to look at it.
Definitely Trust.
All right, thank you, Marco. Nigerian News Direct is next, and this is what we have on this front page. U.S. imposes ban on 2023 election manipulators. That story is on page 2 of the paper this morning, and you already just spoke to this one. Tension as resident doctors embark on a 5-day warning strike this Wednesday. NSIA NCC signed MOU to boost Nigeria's climate action agenda. That's Nigerian News Direct this morning.
And from Nigerian News Direct, let's take a look at the Daily Times of Nigeria. And this is how the Daily Times chooses to lead. 13 days to go. FEC approves 18.6 billion naira for 3 ministers, 37 new private universities. Of course, that is bound to, set off another round of talking points, particularly as it has to do with the review of the performance of the ministries, the cabinet of the outgoing administration, and 37, new private universities. What does that seek to achieve, particularly, with the challenge of revenue generation, particularly for the universities, lecturers being owed? We have not, totally recovered from the unrest, in the public university sector from 2022. What are your thoughts?
Well, the private universities are simply responding to the incompetence of the public universities. People would always invest in sectors they consider viable, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It is the public universities who have to, structure their systems right. The government needs to grant autonomy to these universities so they can run properly like a university should. I recently saw how much universities in the UK generate in terms of IGR, and it is staggering. It's billions of pounds. But nothing stops our universities from running like that. But with the current structure, I doubt that can happen. So I believe You talked about the ministers, federal government approving billions for 3 ministries. I think the administration of the current administration, they just woke up after the elections, and currently they are beginning to do things that we expected of them earlier on in the administration. So I think they should just allow the incoming administration do what they have to do rather than dictate what they should be doing, which I think that's the current situation.
But it's just 2 weeks to the handover dates to a new administration. Wouldn't this affect, transition, new personnel taking over at the different ministries?
Of course, yeah, it will. And I think it is wrong for the outgoing administration to dictate the pace at which the incoming administration would operate. I hope we would not be encouraging waste when the new administration comes in and decides to jettison all of this. It would, further, make us poorer and, ruin our commonwealth, as it were.
Well, one of the issues you've raised seems to be pointing at a probe of this government by the next one. Don't answer that question. Dr. Abimbola Oyarino, researcher, Institute of African and Diaspora Studies at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So we take a break now. When we return, it's time to take on the issues lined up. Please stay with us.
The 2023 induction for re-elected and newly elected governors attracts dignitaries from different walks of life who converge on the banquet hall of the presidential villa in Abuja. It is an occasion that brings both the outgoing, re-elected and newly elected governors together to speak on the tasks ahead of these state executives.
I'm happy to note that democracy is alive and well, vibrant and thriving in Nigeria. With elections now over, it is time for us, all of us, to deliver the promises we made during the campaign. Any public officer who fails to either meet up with the expectations of the people or deliver on his campaign promises will be voted out in the next election.
Unemployment, poverty, and insecurity are difficult tasks incoming administrations are expected to face in their respective states. Building strong, viable institutions in the polity will help in tackling unemployment, reducing poverty, and ensuring the provision of security of lives and property. This is a worthy legacy to be bequeathed to our children and generations to come.
Some of the guest speakers at the event also underscore the importance of nation building through strong partnerships and economic diversification.
We need to start preparing now for a time when our oil and gas may no longer serve us as the main sources of revenue. States with a heavy dependence on FAC allocations will be particularly hit. It is important that you, governors, start now to diversify your revenue sources. Honorable governors, let us be candid. Trust in Nigeria has always been fragile, but following the election, a lot of trust has been broken. Excellencies, you have a lot of healing to do.
Second, you will need trusted partnerships. Partnerships with central government, with the private sector, with civil society, academia, and with international financial institutions, and indeed with the United Nations, of which you are a big part.
The induction exercise is the first formal meeting of the newly elected, re-elected and outgoing governors from the 36 states of the Federation. It is expected that the knowledge shared at this meeting will have a significant impact on governance in their respective states.
And that's our start of stock taking. How has governance been? How would you rate the governance situation in Nigeria in the last 8 years? But we're not going to start exactly from there. We're going to start off from the government that's going to come in. How should they kick off their own version, or how should they kick off governance as they take their oaths of office come May 29? Then we'll come down to look at the last 8 years. How has it been? But to help us in this conversation, we have Mr. Wale Oluwade, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Growth Masters Consulting. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nelson.
Let me start off with this one. The video we just watched is a report of the induction organized by the Nigeria Governors Forum for the new governments or governors that are coming in. One of those that was there has served in Nigeria, and now she serves on a global stage. And in her time, Nigeria received debt cancellation under the Obasanjo administration. But see the words she said, what she said to them. Avoid debts, pay salaries, or fail. Was that the right thing to say?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree anymore with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Like you said, I mean, she's been here. She's not strange to this environment, you know. And when she was a finance minister, especially under Dr. Jonathan, I remember one of her key challenge was this running battle with state governors, you know, who were saying, don't save, because she did set up the Sovereign Wealth Investment Authority, and two governors particularly stand out, former Governor Adams Oshiomhole for Edo State, Rotimi Amechi, who was then Governor of Rivers State and also chairman of the Governors Forum. They were all over the place saying, no, share the money. We can save the money ourselves, you know. Of course, we know how that played out. No money was saved. The money was frittered away. And so she's not strange to this environment. She knows the mindset of our typical Nigerian politician, elected officials, even appointed officials. You know, go a borrowing. And then, of course, you can't actually see anything concrete on ground for what they've done with these huge sums that they've borrowed, you know. So, and then, of course, a strange phenomenon I've seen lately also is about infrastructure, in inverted commas, you know. So they're building bridges, constructing roads, flyovers, you know, that seems to be the popular one now, you know. But then you forget the key, the basics of governance. I mean, the Constitution lays it out in very simple language. You can't, you would need help to actually miss your way as a leader, as a public official, which is the welfare and security of the people. So you create jobs, you give them education, you give them health care, you know, you give them an environment that is safe and secure to live, to do their business, you know. So the failure of governance, actually, I mean, we've always focused essentially on the federal government. I think for me, to a large extent, the states, the subnational entities, you know, have collapsed. There's a semblance of order because you have the state governors going all over the place with sirens and long convoys, you know. But then if you go where the action actually ought to be taking place, that's the local government, it's gone completely, you know, and that is the center of development.
How would that work out? Let me paint this picture. Case in point, the current administration, President Buhari, signed some bills into law, and amongst them is the sort of like moving from the to the concurrent list, from the exclusive list, power and rail transportation. Now, do you think the subnationals would be quick to tap into this and bring it down, as in domesticate it to begin to work their own state? If, as you said, the local government, they're not even allowing the local governments that are theirs to work with to function as they should.
Yeah, I mean, this new constitutional amendment was just maybe a couple of months ago. That was when it was signed. Why did you have to wait? If that was important, why did you have to wait towards the tail end of 8 years? But
is it not better late than never? Better
late than never. But I'm even saying, you know, in my earlier comment, I said there's this undue focus on, I mean, projects, infrastructure. You know, the essence of government, maybe I need to rehash that, you know, it's about people. People has got to be the central point, the focal point of governance. And you have to start from the basis, from the bottom, you know, which is providing essential services for the people. The job of government is not to build infrastructure. I need to say this, you know, I've been here, Mark knows, you know, I've said this over and over again. The job of government is not to build infrastructure. If you have excess money and want to do that, fine. But in a situation where you have scarce resources. So what a responsible government does, provide social services, education, healthcare, jobs, decent accommodation, safe and secure environment. Now, so are you saying they don't need infrastructure, Wale? No. Then you partner with private sector. You know, you make your laws, you know, conducive to attract local and foreign investors. They take that burden off you. So you free up resources, you know, to meet the essential needs of the people. Because, Nyota, how do you square this circle? President Obasanjo wiped off our debt from 36 or whatever to 2 point something when he was leaving 2007. President Yar'Adua tinkered with it, but still left it at 2.5 by the time he died, unfortunately. President Jonathan did his best, moved that debt to 7.5 billion. Guess what? That debt is way over 100 billion US dollars as we speak. But this is the tragedy. So we have this huge pile of debt. But then look at the stats. 20 million children out of school, 133 million Nigerians living in multi-dimensional poverty. Youth unemployment has never been higher. Inflation, you know, it's not even inflation, you should call it hyperinflation. And I could go on and on and on and on. So the question is, so what did you do with the money? This huge debt, what did you do with it? If you have hospitals, doctors, are threatening to go on strike, they go on strike, you plead with them, they still threaten to go on strike, university teachers are going on strike, and the list goes on. You know, so if we refuse to do the right things, and we refuse to focus on the basics, and we keep chasing this, you know, what I call shadows, you know, or fantasies, we still keep having these problems, you know, going around in circles, as it were.
I'm looking at the words that you've uttered, because I imagine that a number of, you know, state governors must have thought about this. And there are states where they have tried to partner with the private sector in terms of infrastructure. Oftentimes, it doesn't come out well, because people, too, also have a certain perception of what government should be doing and where they think private sector should be involved. For instance, toll is a very big deal in many states. If you're to introduce toll and say people will pay toll on a certain road, they do not see the reason why. Anyway, but while we can have that conversation, do you think that the problem, you know, comes from where criticism usually comes from? For instance, you say, we can't see anything that you've done with this money. At the same time, you say, oh, no, don't build infrastructure. That's not your business. And infrastructure is where people see what, you know, governments or governors have been doing, or, governments, because even the federal government included, have been doing with money. That's what they can point to. If you say, oh, we spent it on healthcare, how do you measure, you know, indices like healthcare? How do you measure things like education vis-a-vis the monies that are spent on them and vis-a-vis the results, which are usually delayed? They don't show at the time you put in those monies. Looking at the time frame that governors are in office, do you think that's where the challenge lies for a number of governors who think that, look, if I put my money there, at the end of 4 years, if they're asking me, what have I done? What will I say?
Brilliant question, Maokwe. But you see, that's because the quality of persons we have in manning our institutions, both elected and appointed officials, I'm sorry to say, do not have the requisite competence and understanding of the role of government. Used to, global multilateral agencies, UN, World Bank, IMF, used to measure countries based on some of these things, you know, shiny buildings, infrastructure, long bridges, rails and stuff. But then you realize that you could have growth, economic growth, without development. Now, what's development? So they came up with the HDI, Human Development Index, that measures the quality of healthcare. Infant maternal mortalities, Nigeria is the highest on both. Access to quality education, Nigeria is the worst. Like I just told you, 20 million Nigerian children out of school, the highest in the world.
Yeah, but we can aggregate that. We can push that down. When we look at how that is broken down, you know, vis-a-vis north and south, or even across the different geopolitical zones, you know, the results are different.
Yeah, but that's still Nigeria.
Indeed.
Whether it's north or south, it's still Nigeria. They're not Nigeria or Chad, it's still Nigeria. That should actually be a worry, that why should this imbalance be so negatively skewed from one region to the other? And then we hold the leaders of that region, you know, but that's a different. I'm addressing this point you raised about because the infrastructure is what people can see. Let me even help you, Maokwe. So if you did this infrastructure, how has this level of infrastructural funding or financing, how has it positively impacted on your bottom line? Yeah, government is business in a different way, you know. So the economic indices, the GDP, has it grown? Has it moved positively? No. You know, per capital income? No. Ease of doing business? No. See, you're talking about bridges and roads. What about critical sectors like power? I mean, I listened to your guest who did the newspaper review. I mean, 99 shutdowns, grid collapses in how many months? You know, and then
9.
You're still queuing in 9 months. You're still queuing, you know, to buy fuel. The refineries haven't worked. So I go back to the point. You know, see, there's this, and pardon me to be a bit, to sound spiritual. Jesus Christ in Matthew 9, I think 35, 36 said, he looked at, the Bible said, he looked at them and he had compassion, you know, because they were weary and scattered, like sheep without a shepherd. The basic problem Nigeria has had over the decades is our leaders without compassion. Now, a fanciful word for compassion is patriotism. Patriotism for this country, to put the interest of this country far above every other interest. You're talking about infrastructure. Mark, I will shock you. As of the last time I checked, there are 14,000 abandoned projects all over Nigeria. 14,000. I didn't say 1,000, 14,000. So government officials are quick to get governors and presidents to sign off into these projects because they have an opportunity to steal, to siphon state coffers. Ajaokuta Steel, aluminum smelter, the list goes on. Like I told you,
that might be one. And I really hate to be in a position where I'm playing devil's advocate.
No, you have to.
But
you have to,
that
so
might be one of the reasons. But we do know that in terms of our budgeting process, that has also been a very big problem.
Can't we amend that process? Can't we fix that process?
In such a way that, you know, it mandates somebody who comes after you to finish a project. If the person doesn't share your vision, what do you do? For instance, the rail project started by the the Jonathan administration. Some of it were completed by the Buhari administration, and you know others were started. Now, assuming a government comes in that doesn't share that as a priority, and that is listed as an uncompleted project, would it have been because the Buhari administration or people there wanted to just siphon money?
Yeah, I get your point, but this is the point. If I am president or governor, and I must give credit to President Buhari because when he came in and he said, no, let's try as much as possible to finish some of these projects, you know, some of the rails, the road. But then the question is, after 8 years, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, 120 kilometers, Maokwe, still uncompleted. I mean, can you explain that to anybody?
It's almost done.
Almost. After how many years? Does it take 4 years to build a 120-kilometer stretch of road, and that road has been under construction from whenever? And you can talk about several others. But, you know, this undue fixation on projects, infrastructure, I am telling you, the role and primary responsibility of government is the welfare and security of the people. And I will repeat at the risk of sounding like a cracked vinyl: healthcare, education, decent accommodation, safe and secure environment. You could actually go to space and build a space shuttle, whatever. If you don't take care of this, you have failed. See, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala spoke yesterday and said, pay salaries. I mean, governance looks so mundane, but it is in its mundaneness that our people miss it. Because they keep, you know, focusing on some of these, like I said, fanciful things. You know, do your job as government. You have civil servants, pay them. Those who have retired, pay their gratuities, pay their pensions. Pay your teachers, recruit enough doctors, build primary health cares, build primary schools, secondary schools, you know, have decent See, there was a Mark, you said, how do you measure, if you spend money on social projects, you said, how do you measure it? There is a list of 1,000 top universities in the world. No Nigerian university is in the top 1,000 universities in the world. How do you explain that? top 1,000 universities in the world. There is not a single Nigerian university in that list. How do you explain that?
So in this which you've said, you've sort of like looked at the focus on infrastructure. You've said, no, that shouldn't be. We should look at healthcare, education, decent accommodation. How would you rate the current administration in the last 8 years? In the different indices you've put out there, healthcare, education, safe environment.
Jobs, creation of jobs.
Jobs.
For the youth. 8 years has been a waste. And I've been, and I say that trying to be modest. You know, it's been a waste. Because what, like I said, you know, the job of a president, you know, and I have come here, I've been guilty, I've come here and spoken directly about the president and exclude the governors. And I know most of the governors will have been, you know, smiling and praising God, oh, nobody's talking about us, you know. So I talk now about, when I say government, I'm saying federal and state governors, you know. So it's been a waste, actually, because the job of the president is like is a conductor of an orchestra, you know, a class captain, as it were, who sits down with the 36 state governors and say, gentlemen, see, these are the facts of where we are as a nation. We have 20 million youth, children out of school, like Mark said, and Governor Kebbi, Governor Jigawa, Governor Borno, Governor Kaduna Kano, this, I need to see you especially, you know, and then have somebody put up a slide. So you have unemployment, you have primary health care, maternal and infant. So you say to them, these are the issues. These are the things we should focus on, governors. So what are the challenges? Okay, so Mr. President, you know, the law says local governments are this and that. Okay, so we need to go to the Senate. Get the Senate to amend the laws to make local governments completely autonomous. You know, and like you said, like this, you know, power and rail that was removed. I mean, if you have a president and governor that are working in sync and who understand their job roles, you know, and not playing to the gallery, not doing stuff to get people in regalias, you know, this funny stuff will gather people, get the TV stations, 5, 10 TV stations, and then splash it all over the place that you're commissioning project. I mean, come on. See, I grew up in the Southwest, Ibadan. I was born and I was raised in Ibadan, you know. I mean, this is not governance. I'm sorry to say, you know, this is not governance. So President Buhari, for me, the 8 years is a waste. And what saddens me the most is that he's piled up over $100 billion in debt that I do not know
that might not
whose generation is going to pay.
That might not be very correct. Going by the debt management office,
what figures do you have?
41 billion.
41 billion.
Over 41 billion.
No, that's
December.
That's not correct. As of March, it was 46. When this 22.7 Ways and Means was approved by the Senate illegally, so to say, converted to loan.
So you're putting it all together, both external and internal debt?
No. Yes, Ways and Means is debt. It's become a debt, you know. So if you put all of this together, over 100 billion, you know, and somebody's got to pay it. The 22.7 trillion Ways and Means converted to debt now has a 40-year tenure. You know, you and I are not going to be here. You know, my daughter and your children are going to pay this debt. The people who collected the money and we don't have anything to show, they've all gone. They've bought private jets, they've bought SUVs, their kids are doing whatever in America, buying mansions all over the place, you know. So we can keep playing this game, you know, and fooling ourselves. But fun enough, the rest of the world are not playing games. I listened to Femi Adesina, the essay to the president, you know, each time he comes on here. But this last time he came, I mean, I listened to him giving a scorecard for the president. And he said something like they did a book, you know, just to put a document where everything, the accomplishments. And I don't know who was asking him, so what was the job number? He said 100 and something thousand jobs in 8 years. President Biden in America, in 3.5 years, the government has created 12.5 million jobs in 3.5 years. So if you have appointed or elected officials who don't have any accountability or sanctions for bad governance, for failure, I mean, an egregious level of incompetence, you keep going to have this kind of situation we're having. You know, there is no way you square this circle. This is an abysmal failure on all fronts. See, in January to March, we've had 1,258 deaths from bandits, terrorist activities, all kinds of criminal situations in Nigeria. 1,258 deaths, over 700 injured, and all of that. Every day you check, I mean, even on your scroll bar in Nasarawa, 15 people killed and all of that. So when the president came, they said, we're going to do insecurity, corruption, and the economy. What's the result?
Let's take it to Lagos. Our colleagues are standing by and with some questions for you.
Thank you, Nyota. Mr. Luade, to say that you haven't minced words would be very much an understatement, but just to support that aspect of the conversation, it has taken the former Minister of Finance and President of the World Trade Organization, to attend that induction ceremony for governors, to speak some truth to them, that has brought us to where we are, with this platform where we're continuing the conversation. Then what now is the purpose of the induction ceremony if, the governors, the outgoing governors and the incoming governors do not have that kind of truth-telling, amongst themselves where, they can hand over categorical notes, to incoming administrations and say, this is where we're headed. What can we do to achieve some of these tasks that we're setting before them now with this conversation?
Thank you, Bimbo. I think what happened, the induction program is just maybe 30–50% because, like I just told you, a critical component is missing. What's missing in that exercise, which is president-elect to have been part of it, because, like I said, the president, is like the conductor of an orchestra or a class captain, a football coach who says, this is how you should go. These are the areas where we're terribly deficient, and these are the priority areas we need to focus on. And let me use this illustration. America is a 22 trillion economy, but guess what? That economy is broken down into the different states in America. California has 3.5 trillion of that 23 overall American economy, followed by Texas, with 2.3 trillion. So what does California do? Services, tech sector, so Silicon Valley and all of that. Then in Texas, it's basically maybe oil, and then you have New York coming in third at about 2.0, 1.9 trillion GDP of the economy of New York, basically financial services. And then Illinois, number 4, and so on. So that is why you need a president to gather these governors together, sit together, so that they're all pulling in the same direction to say, okay, we cannot have 20 million Nigerian children of school-going age out of school. How do we, reduce this on a yearly basis? What are the strategies? What are the solutions, applicable smart goals? And then you put timelines to them. So if the president and governors have to meet on a monthly basis, to review performance, and that also means the president assembles a team of capable people, the governors assembles a team of capable people, and then at the presidential level, you don't appoint people and give them tasks, and then you keep them there. You don't do peer review, you don't do performance monitoring and evaluation, and so you give somebody a job for 8 years, minister for FCT, minister for works and housing, minister for power, just name it. And the country has regressed rather than even stagnate, and you don't fire them. So that part of the conversation I didn't hear, but it was at least good that doctor, maybe if somebody like me had been there to speak to them, they will not take, they'll say, who is this one, who is he? But with the bona fides of somebody like Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, I was excited when I saw her saying the simple things. Governance is about the basics, the simple things. You see all the big stuff, we keep fixating over. And I'll keep saying it, a governor does all sorts of projects, gather people, waste resources. The resources that could have been used to build or create MSME clusters, industrial hubs, tech hubs, create jobs for people. Nigerians are voting, especially our youth population.
If I may come in there, do you believe that party differences, difference in political ideology could be, a sort of a stumbling block to achieving a unified, implementation of human policies and human capital development, and water view if we went on in that regard. And apart from that, how do you commit, executives to abiding by their party manifesto in line with what they implement? For instance, we had the crisis with the Naira redesign policy, and the question was, what was in the manifesto, in the APC manifesto, in terms of, economic development? What did it deliver? I wonder if you catch my drift.
I do. Brilliant question again, Bimbo. Now, I don't think there's any party that is against human development as in eradicating poverty. If you have 133 million of your citizens living in multidimensional poverty, and you need to create jobs for them, provide access to opportunities for them. If you have 20 million people out of school, children of school-going age, I don't think any political party has an issue with this. But then you're right, of course. I mean, our political parties, in any case, do they have any distinct ideologies? The answer is no. But then coming to the issue of how do political parties hold their governments accountable, that's not the job of political parties, I'm sorry to say. That is the job. In a democracy, we claim to be a democracy, in my opinion, and not just my own opinion. I mean, there's a democratic index, we're not going into that now. Nigeria is not a democratic society. We don't practice democracy. There is the principle of checks and balances. It is the job of the legislature to hold executive arm of government accountable, to say, no, this is not what you should do. I mean, but if you have if you have a legislature before it comes on board who said from the get-go that whatever comes here, however silly it sounds, is going to pass. Then we're going to have the crisis we have on our hands. Sadly, that circus has taken off again. We're in that circus now. People going all over the place wants to be Senate president and speaker and all of that. And even the media, we're not asking them the right questions. Are you fit? Are you a fit and proper person from your antecedents? Or does the executive just want to put you there as a rubber stamp, as a lackey, so that you turn the other way? And of course, they have something on you. So if you don't play ball, they can bring out your files from the anti-corruption agencies and all of that. So the job of ensuring the executive arm of government, either at the federal or state levels, do their jobs, deliver on their mandates, is that of the legislature. Well, that is what a democracy guarantees.
Perhaps we just have to expect that this new crop of legislators will do their jobs. There's a conversation with them later on this morning. But, there was a figure you gave the other time, which in perhaps adding to it, you might be a little shocked. You gave a figure of 14,000 abandoned projects. Well, the CIPM says there are 56,000 abandoned projects all across Nigeria, and which that's according to the CIPM, which the Institute of Quantity Surveyors valued at 12 trillion naira, and that's over the past 20 years. CIPM also said that in Bayelsa State alone, there are 1,700 NDDC abandoned projects. Bayelsa alone, NDDC alone, 1,700 abandoned projects. The question around that is along the line of anti-corruption. You said something the other time that some people will just make some propositions to whoever, and then they will come up with the idea to say, you know what, let's do it. And then along the line, it gets abandoned. So in terms of anti-corruption, do you see, let's just focus on infrastructure. How well would you say we even made any attempt at fighting corruption, especially in the area of infrastructure, particularly and specifically speaking to the abandoned projects that we have had? Because more than once, a number of people will say there are some budgets that have been given to some projects, but they never see the light of day. What do you make of that, particularly in the area of infrastructure?
Thank you, Ayo. I mean, I love this question. The anti-corruption mantra of this administration, is just what it is, just a mantra. It's got no soul, no life, and nothing better encapsulates that than the way the former EFCC czar, was kicked out of office. In a gale, embroiled in a gale of, I mean, the loot recovered, the custodian of that loot also was alleged, anyway, to have relooted and all of that, and a probe panel was set up, and we never saw the outcome of that probe panel, and then he's out of office and all of that. And then, of course, you also remember the case of the former Accountant General Idris Ahmed, 109 billion naira alleged to have been stolen or diverted, or and the last I heard about that case, at the next adjourned case, the statement, a key statement, the former AGF made couldn't be found in the file. So that basically summarizes our attitude to anti-corruption. And it boils down to weakness. A complete erosion of the independence of state institutions. And I've advised or canvassed elsewhere that until we have institutions that are truly independent of political interference, so for instance, EFCC, ICPC, the heads of those agencies should never be appointed, by the president. They should be independent. Anyway, so coming to the issue of projects, and Ayo, you touched on something very key. The NDDC alone in Bayelsa has over 1,000 projects. Guess what? The man who wants to be Senate president was chairman of the board of NDDC. And even then, I remember the MD then and himself had this public face-off, throwing allegations and counter-allegations. So we have a long way to go, and that's why I will keep saying it. In this environment, if we had built our cash reserves, we have money and all of that, yeah, governments, can, fund infrastructure, but we don't have the resources. We're spending 96% of our revenues to service debt. So we do not have money to even talk about building projects or whatever. Whatever money we can raise, is to take care of social issues, education, healthcare, creation of decent housing, provision of security, and then, of course, catalyzing SMEs, incubation and all of that. So we need an audit of all these 56,000 plus abandoned projects ASAP. The new government needs to do a forensic audit of these 56,000 abandoned projects all over Nigeria. And whoever is found culpable, whoever is fingered to have, held positions and misapplied or mismanaged or stolen or diverted funds should be held accountable. Part of the big, problem we have as a nation is a lack of sanctions or accountable. And that's why I said we don't practice democracy, because democracy, though, could be cantankerous, it could be difficult, but it's got safeguards. Part of the safeguards, like I said, is checks and balances. And, people, if democracy does not have anything, it guarantees accountability and sanction. So if you have people commit heinous crimes against the state and they just walk away with it, no sanctions, and then they show up after 5 years to want to be governor, want to be president, or want to be senate president, you cannot grow a society in that manner. I'm sorry to say, Ayo.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wale Oluwade, for coming in this morning. But just before we let you go, you've talked about what the incoming administration should do. Particularly, let's look at the area of education and housing. What would you say they should do real quick in like 10 seconds?
Education should be priority. Poverty eradication, using education as a kickstart, that should be priority. And when I'm talking about education, I'm talking about primary education, universal access to primary, secondary education. We can have a debate about university education, but if you don't educate your people, you're already programmed to fail. Basic.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Oluwade is the Chief Executive Officer of Growth Masters Consulting, and we were talking about assessing the governance level of the current administration and a word of advice for the incoming administration. So as they do, we'll be back in a moment. Just stay with us.
As you can see right there, Mr. Garba Shehu, who joins us this morning, is Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity in the Office of the President. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm pretty sure you listened to a little bit of the previous conversation. Would you want to give any response to any of the things that you heard?
Well, first of all, let me say, I don't want to be questioning the gentleman's patriotism. He's Nigerian himself, he's entitled to. But it's amazing that someone would sit down for more than half an hour saying negative things all through about his country. This man does not see one thing about Nigeria. He didn't say it, even he had it. And I think he needs help, honestly speaking. And should I suggest to him, let him go around for office. That's why democracy is the best system of government. If you have people in office and they are not getting it right, so put yourself up, run for office, defeat them in election, come and do it better. This man cannot, I don't want to make assumptions, but you can't sit down there and just say, absolutely nothing works in the country. So what does he want Nigerians to do? Buy air ticket and japa? Is that what he wants? Or he wants Nigerians to cry and despair? I have seen nothing to inspire anyone from his speech. And I feel sad that somebody who has achieved so much in this country, given his position and I assume, success that he has achieved in business, I think that he needs to revise his own, look at everything and decide whether he really can take a look at some other pictures and not be fixated with negatives.
Perhaps, Mr. Shehu, the challenge is in communication by government. Most of the time, I mean, we've seen the highlights of the Buhari government that was published from the communication team of the president, highlights between 2015 and 2022 or 2023. Perhaps the challenge is not whether or not government did something. Perhaps the challenge is that of communicating to people to the point that they will accept that indeed government has done something that really touched their lives.
Yeah, I believe that yes, the problem is communication. But essentially, this problem is also the fact that journalism, so long as that rule in journalism remains that bad news is good news, we'll continue to be where we are.
Well, it is one thing to put the news out. It's another thing altogether for the people involved in this particular news to be able to come out and say, it's not exactly the way it is. You are not unaware that people have complained themselves hoarse. Let's take a few issues. Unemployment, the figure has always been on the increase. Once we had a conversation with you, Mr. Garba, asking the question around the number of people that have been pulled out of poverty when the president promised in 2018, was it 2019, that he was going to pull 100 million out of poverty, 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over 10 years in partnership with the states. We had a conversation with you after like 3 years of that, asking how far so far. You said, there was no figure. Education, many people are complaining about that one. Health, a good number of people go out of the country. Just on education, we've seen the budgets that people have to spend outside of Nigeria, even in Sudan, just because they want education. Health, people leave the country simply because they want better health for themselves. So the figures are all out there for people, things that touch the direct lives of people. So with these realities that Nigerians see, those highlights that you put out there, saying this is what the Buhari government has done, it's just paper. That's what some people would say. How do you respond?
It is paper because essentially also the medium can be the message. If the communication channel is cluttered and is cacophonous, or it's not even listening, then you will have a problem in having end-to-end communication. So, but let's go into some of the numbers that you are talking about, or the gentleman who just left was speaking about. I was amazed that he was attributing to Femi Adesina that Femi said only 100,000 jobs had been created by Buhari in 8 years. That cannot be true. I mean, if only he would care to check. This thing is on YouTube, and the numbers are there. In agriculture alone, the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, RIFA, is talking about 12 million new jobs. Look at what we did with fertilizer. This administration inherited just 4 functional fertilizer processing companies. We have 52 that are working today. And these 52 are supplying fertilizer to, let's say, this 12 million new rice farmers. Today, rice farmers alone domestically produce between 8 to 9 million paddy rice, which is feeding rice mills. The last count I had from Kano alone, they had 62 new rice mills that hadn't existed before. We have over 100 in Nigeria, and these things north and south. And the enormous number of jobs that have been created from this is simply is amazing. And this country has literally achieved food self-sufficiency. We have diversified the economy. We're no longer a monocultural economy. And somebody would just sit down there and just tell you there is nothing about Nigeria. No.
Mr. Joe, let's take the conversation away from the young man. Let's focus on the issues that are being raised right now. I mean, speak to those issues. I mean, you are speaking right now to agriculture, which he didn't raise, and that's fine. But speak to education, speak to health, speak to inflation, speak to, I mean, everyone, a good number of people will give it to government that, infrastructure has been fairly okay. Speak to the partnership with the state, speak to security. Those issues, Mr. Shehu, you're a journalist as well. They are the realities that people encounter on a daily basis.
Give me time, I will address us.
Go ahead. Issues. Let's see how much we can cover.
Well, when we came in 2015, the country was broken into pieces because you had Boko Haram territory created out of this country with the headquarters in Goza, a country with a flag and system of administration and taxation the size of Belgium in the northeast. 17 of 27 local governments of Borno State had been conquered. And no road outside Maiduguri leading to any part of the country other than Kano, which is Maiduguri, which is in Kano Road, was under the control of the state. All the others had been controlled by Boko Haram. Why is that republic, the Boko Haram tradition? That's simply. And the preoccupation of government, as we speak today, how do we put back people in those communities? IDP camps are being shut down. They are rebuilding roads and schools and places of worship and markets, things that have been destroyed, and all those roads. That's one aspect of it. Now, I spoke to you about agriculture. This country had spent $5 million US before this administration every day to buy foreign rice. Today, not $1 US leaves the Central Bank of Nigeria to go and procure rice. Look at what we did with power. Power availability in homes, distribution, was 2,500 megawatts. Today, between 4,000 and 5,000 is available every day. And even this is just a 1/4 of availability, because power availability in the country is about 20,000 megawatts as we speak. And the problem is evacuation. Distribution is the key issue. And this is why the administration went into this strategic partnership with Germany, who have sent Siemens and massive transformers, meters are coming into the country so that the power we are able to generate that is dormant, that we're planning to sell to neighboring countries, because nobody is using it at home, we can distribute and take around. So there's so much that we have done, but the thing is that if somebody decides to say they will stay on the negatives, you can't help them.
Well, Mr. Shehu, I'd like us to return to the issue of agriculture. You spoke earlier about how Nigeria has achieved food sufficiency, and you talked about the efforts towards shoring up agriculture in the area of rice. I'd like to remind you, by the way, that, a bag of rice is still hovering between 45,000 naira and 50,000 naira, a far cry from what it was at the time that your administration, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, came on board. It was somewhere between 5 and 10,000 naira. So I'd like to ask why, in spite of the border closure policies of the government and the efforts of, the government in the area of development of rice farming, the price of rice has not been able to come down. And it's debatable also, just to add to that, I'd like you to speak to it, that Nigeria has achieved food sufficiency. Inflation is hitting 22%, which is, by the way, fueled by food inflation. So I'd like you to speak to all of these issues. I wonder if, you're talking about the same Nigeria when you speak, glowingly about the efforts of the outgoing administration in the area of food sufficiency.
Of course, we're speaking about the same Nigeria. We are not speaking of the Nigeria in the moon, as addressed by the previous speaker, Wale Kosimsa. My sense is that we have to look at what is happening in the country in the context of global situation. There is a global cost of living crisis that is rocking the entire world. And this is very easy to see. When coronavirus epidemic came and locked down nations of the world, everyone was isolated. Virtually all nations were isolated from each other. This affected everything. Let's talk about this fertilizer, because it feeds agriculture output, then pricing are affected by the input. We were buying phosphate from Morocco and from Russia. And at the time the program of the presidential fertilizer program took off, this administration had the audacity to even brand the price of the control price of fertilizer on each bag with the telephone number, that this will sell for 5,500. If anyone should sell at above 5,500, call this number and report to them, and they will be actioned. Something will be done about it. Today, fertilizer is about 14,000. If you buy fertilizer at 14,000, it will obviously reflect on what you sell, the rice that you produce and sell. And why is it so? Because of what followed coronavirus lockdown, the crisis that it generated in the supply chain globally, and particularly in the last 2 or so years. The Ukraine-Russia war had also an implication for us, because then the relief that we're getting, additional phosphate from Russia, you can no longer obtain that. Some of our people are going to as far as Canada, and if you see the prices, they're just so high. But to keep their plants running, they keep buying. So the point is that if the cost of input is high, arising from the crisis that is global, Nigeria is not immune to this global challenge. It's not immune.
Mr. Shehu, that could also, the argument could also go, back and forth, where you talk about, the crisis affecting, the economy and the agricultural sector. For instance, amid the Russia-Ukraine war, there have been deals signed to ensure that Ukraine continues to export its grain. So we wonder where Nigeria's creativity is amid all of these challenges. But let's also look at another aspect of the administration as we continue to reflect towards the winding down of the Buhari administration. The perception is about the outgoing president's inability to manage the diversities of Nigerians, and him being emotionally disconnected from Nigerians, his penchant to be able to travel out, to jet out of the country, even amid insecurity and attacks in the country. How is the administration processing this feedback?
Well, let me say that if you are talking about attacks and terrorism, philosophically, globally, and this is global, terrorism is supposed to stop governance, it's supposed to undermine society, it's supposed to abort normalcy in societies. So if your president decides that he's no longer going to go to Ghana for ECOWAS or New York for United Nations because terrorists have struck, what that tells you then is that the terrorists have won, because that's essentially what they want, to undermine governance and thwart normalcy. So, but to say president is not attached, I think that, and I spoke about this document that we have put together, enunciating all of the things that the president has done. And there also is a big discussion on the social investment program, the biggest on the continent. Something that had led to increased school enrollment, because more than 10 million children get a meal a day when they go. And today, as we speak, this country had statistically between 12 to 14 million out of school children. And I'm sorry again, the previous gentleman Wale said 20 million. That is outrageous. It doesn't exist anywhere outside his own imagination. The success of the administration is in the fact that this has been lowered to 8 million. It is not over. It is an ongoing process. There's so many programs of government.
Well, it does happen that, I mean, Mr. Garba Shehu was still speaking. I don't know if you can hear us now.
Young people, cheap access to cheap capital for startups, all these things to speak to kind-heartedness. It cannot be said that this president is detached.
Well, Mr. Garba Shehu, I think that, you know, the people of Nigeria will continue to assess the president from how they experienced his own leadership. Those who believe that, you know, his personality and his style of governance explains how he ran things, you know, they have their own opinion. Those who also, you know, think that that's how it should be run will also have their own opinion. But I think a majority of Nigerians will explain or would assess the Buhari administration in terms of how they experienced him. And largely, for a number of people, when it comes to issues of disaster, insecurity, very rarely did we see the president visiting people as a result of this sort of occurrences. Even the recent floods, are one of the issues that immediately come to mind. But let me take you back to the issue of electricity, which you have disputed. You've talked about megawatts being increased. Indeed, we saw over the course of this administration attempts to increase, build infrastructure, strengthen infrastructure around generation and transmission, which seem to have been a major problem. We've also seen, you know, attempts to try and buoy the capacity of distribution companies by granting them loans, more or less, or let's say, loans or grants, if you will, just to ensure that they stay in business. However, the experience of a lot of Nigerians when it comes to electricity, apart from the major cities of Lagos and maybe Abuja, for a number of people living in rural Nigeria or a lot of other states, and I'm not talking about the capitals, even the capitals of this state, the experiences will definitely differ. What they have felt in their homes has been very different from what was promised. So when you talk to these people about megawatts that have been generated, vis-a-vis the experiences of people, there are huge questions as to what exactly the Buhari administration achieved.
Well, we have achieved a lot. As I said, quantitatively, availability has increased 20,000 megawatts. That's enormous. And even transmission, which you said was a problem, is actually not essentially the problem, because transmission has also been enhanced from about 5,000 megawatts to between 7,000 to 8,000, capacity. That's
to modify. Sorry to interrupt you. Perhaps I should modify my question. Do you have a way of would I say measuring just how much electricity was delivered to each Nigerian home over the course of the Buhari administration?
Of course, there is. Because when I spoke about distribution earlier, I said on record, the best of times we had up to 1,000 megawatts. 25,000 was the norm. 2,500 was the norm. 3,000 was exceptional. Today, the norm is between 4,000 to 5,000. And why is this so? It is because, as you know yourself, that these distribution companies had been sold to incompetence. People who thought this was another cheap money, and I'm sorry to say, some new MTN or Econet, that money would just be dropping in without investing just anything in metering. So what happens is they are called upon to take power, and they said they won't take power because if they take power, they have to pay for it, and they lack the capacity to distribute. And these owners have been so fortified by, so insulated in what they have been dashed by administrations before our own, that it is difficult. But I speak to you today, I'm sure up to 50% of the discourse have been recovered one way or the other by government using due processes. And the new owners, as you have just seen in Abuja, going to transport, it's going to happen all around the country because people who had no experience, who had no hint of how this could be done. When we came in, recovery was just 15% of power issued to them, 15%. How can you go unsubsidized by 75%? As much as effort is being done, we're still hovering between 35 to 40% of recovery. Taking power without payment. And some of their owners, even ordinary board meetings, they go to Dubai and Hawaii, islands that have to go and junket and enjoy themselves. This country deserves a better deal. And this is what the administration is doing now.
So while all of that backroom work was going on to try and see how the distribution companies could be resuscitated and transmission could be strengthened, what I'm asking is, did this administration have a mechanism to see how much electricity each Nigerian home was getting? How many hours per day, for instance, the average Nigerian home was getting? That's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, there's the metering scheme. The metering scheme is regimented. There are parts, or you mentioned there are some parts of Lagos, and you said Abuja. Yeah, there are parts of Nigeria today that pay for 24-hour electricity supply. And the ones who get 8 hours per day, they don't pay in their charges as much as those who enjoy. So it's a graduated scheme. There are people who pay.
Mr. Garba Shehu, I'm also a citizen of Nigeria, and I happen to live somewhere in this country. So yes, I do know about the graduated way that homes are built and areas are built. We even have areas that have reached some private agreement with discos and are willing to pay a premium so they can get more electricity. But even in those places, 24-hour electricity is not guaranteed. So I'm asking for the very rural areas, those under the RT or R4 scheme, is there a way we are measuring to say, on an average, we want to be able to deliver, say, 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours a day at the minimum to a Nigerian home? Do we have a way of measuring that?
Why are you so? I don't want to say why so mean? Why 2 hours? Why 3 hours? That's certainly below what a national average should look like. I think that we're a serious country, And look at
Indeed, we are a serious country. We should be a serious company, Mr. Garbache. Well, as I speak to you, even some areas in Lagos, as I speak to you, have not seen electricity for up to 2 weeks. There are places that are in total darkness. They don't even know when the next electricity supply will come to them. So do we have a way of, this is in spite of how many megawatts. So when we talk about megawatts, it really doesn't make any difference to them. I mean, they don't understand what it is we're talking about because they haven't seen any electricity in their homes. Do we have a way, are the discos being held accountable in such a way that we know that the end user is the most important person along the scheme, and we should have a way of measuring how much electricity each Nigerian home is getting on a weekly basis? That's what I'm asking.
Well, the discourse are being checked, and this is why some of them are being sent out of the business, and the business be recovered and be sold to new owners. Now, as you want me to tell you exactly what measurement, what is there to measure how many houses are?
Well, it's okay if we don't have it. I mean, I think that. Some people will say, if we don't have it, we don't have it. Because at the end of the day, the consumer should have been at the heart of all of the investment that was made in the power sector. And there has to be a way of checking if the consumer is really getting all of the benefits of government investment in that particular sector. Yes, there will also be arguments around rural electrification process and seeing how that has, succeeded in some parts of the country. But let me take you up on another issue, the farmer herdsman crisis, which is where another very sore area for a number of people. With benefit of hindsight, over the 8 years of this administration, do you think that particular matter, which became extremely touchy, do you think it could have been handled better?
Well, first of all, let me go back to your power issue. The real test of what gets to people is in getting people to say how they feel about all of these things. And I'm sure your network, if not it, so many other networks have done these things. They're going to talk to tailors and welders and who say, we were getting these numbers of hours before, and now this is what we are getting, and talking about improvement generally. So to go to your own question on farmer hardest claim, please, let's make the admission that it's the historical problem. I've read pre-colonial and post-colonial literature on some of these things. These things had existed even then, and there were problems that were being transmitted from Nigeria to the Queen's Court in the UK. Farmers and herders had always fought because the land space is shrinking, and water is getting less and less, and so therefore there's more competition for grazing land because farming is increasing, population growing exponentially, and so therefore more need for farmland and this. But the First Republic, had the grazing routes from the end of the country in the north down to the delta and to the sea.
Russia, I'm trying to bring you, I'm so sorry that, I need to bring you back to the present. I'm talking about the 8 years. Yes, we can appreciate the historical antecedents of this particular problem, but putting all of that in mind and how the Buhari administration handled the particular issue, would you say that it could have done better? That's the question I'm asking.
There's always room for improvement. Nobody will come before you and say we have achieved perfection. But do you know that this administration has put in place a policy that had not existed before, and for states that have embraced it, the National Livestock Transformation Plan, NLTP, is the perfect solution agreed to by governors of all of the states and the federal government, saying this is the way to go. Some states are still difficult about it. A few states had embarked upon it, and the federal government had come to their support and a lot of change is happening. The change would probably not come in 1 or 2 days or a week or so, but the processes have begun. Niger, Katsina, Borno, Yobe, there are quite a number of states that have chosen that path. Adamawa as well, the vice president was there to launch it. So the choices the states make largely determine how much progress is made, because under our own constitution, the land belongs to the state and the federal government has no control over it.
Mr. Garba, one of the things, I just have one question for you, and it boils more or less like sitting on this statement: I belong to no one and I belong to everyone. That's one of the key statements the president made on his inauguration in 2015. Now, when the president took office, and indeed during the campaign, at the back of the minds of most Nigerians, especially the common folk in Nigeria, is the fact that we have a president who is a man that will fight corruption, who is above board when it comes to fighting corruption, and he will ensure that all those who are stealing our public funds are dealt with. Would you say that that has been effectively done in terms of fighting corruption and transparency in government? Because there are arguments in different quarters that in this administration, many who should have gone to jail are walking the streets free of charge, and many who cannot account for their wealth are suddenly wealthier than they were before they came into office. How would you say this administration has fared in the area of transparency and fight against corruption?
Well, if you ask the president this question, he will equally tell you he's baffled by the fact that people who otherwise would have been in jail are riding their Rolls Royces and their aircraft and freely, roaming around. Under our constitution, the president can, the executive arm under the president can only investigate and prosecute. I'm not here to blame judiciary for whatever has gone wrong. Some of the problems may be prosecutorial or whatever, or investigative. However, the moment the president the executive arm takes this matter to court, his job is done, and it is up to the courts to determine whether one is guilty or not. Under this administration, you know that the highest official in the nation's parliament had been prosecuted for corruption-related matters. The highest person in the nation's court system, the judiciary, had been prosecuted. The highest person, the third highest person in the executive arm of government is still undergoing trial. So the president is still what he is. He's still above board as his spokesperson. I go to bed soundly. I sleep soundly, convinced that nobody, whether from Nigeria or outside the country, the journalists will call you and say, we have discovered this bank account and your boss has these huge millions. That's not Buhari. So he's well above scandal, and that's the way it will end.
Garba Shehu, because, as we have said here, Maokwe reiterated to you, perception and reality, the lines are very, very blurred. But at this time, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation and responding to our questions. Garba Shehu is Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity in the Office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and all the best. Thank you. All right, so we're back right after now on the last lap. Do stay with us. Well, before we talk about the tasks before the 10th National Assembly, we should cross that hurdle first of the leadership of the 10th National Assembly, and Dr. Emmanuel Ona joins us this morning. He is Associate Professor, Department of Political Science at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The tasks are definitely lined up for them in the Constitution and all of the laws of the country, oversight and all of those things. But what do you make of the kerfuffle, as some people would put it, over who leads the National Assembly, the Senate presidency, the speakership, and other principal offices?
Yeah, of course. It is to be expected. I'm not surprised that people are, aggrieved and others seem happy. It is in the line of politics. There is no way we bring together 109 senators. We are talking about senators, people, accomplished human beings, and tell them to accept something, and all of them will just say yes. Or 360 members of the House of Representatives, another set of accomplished human beings, and they expect that everybody will just say yes to whatever you do. So it is in line with politics.
The natural question, which I've asked severally, and I'm going to ask you as well, perhaps from your experience and perhaps even from the books, of what significance, or maybe I should put it differently for you, on which side does this zoning arrangement lean more to? The political side or the governance side?
Well, it is, I don't think it will be fair to make that kind of straight demarcation between politics and governance.
Really?
Because one leads to the other, and ultimately both of them are intertwined. It is from politics that you get those who will administer governance.
But the question around that really, Dr. Oda, my apologies, is it more for governance than for political correctness?
That is exactly what I'm leading up to. Because you must play some politics before you get to governance. And even while in governance, you still have to play politics. So, as I said earlier, what is happening is in line with politics, because politics encompasses even governance. Are you getting it? Politics is the larger term, and governance is under politics. So what is happening now is the prelude to governance. First, we have done elections, and after elections, we are now going to do the the micro elections into specific offices in the institutions of government.
So are you saying if we do not, if certain individuals or certain regions are not represented where they expect to be represented or as they should be represented, it will affect governance?
No, the issue is this. Everybody is part of democracy and is part of federalism, that every section of the country will necessarily be represented in government. So the issue of zoning is like trying to achieve that constitutional provision in the best way possible. So I know that the parties are trying to see that everybody gets what they deserve while getting something. Are you getting it? There are two things here. You get something and you get what you deserve. Some people now are rising in opposition because they do not understand why they should get what they have been assigned. Are you getting me? In that case, they are not comfortable with what they have been given. They don't feel that is what they deserve, But the parties, in their wisdom, have looked at everything concerning the politics that they have been playing, and they feel that these are the positions and these are the places where they should go, deservedly. Are you getting it now? So, in the party's own eyes, everybody has deserved what they have given them. In the eyes of the senators and maybe House of Representatives members that are concerned, some of them don't feel so. Some feel that they deserve more than they have been given. Others feel that they deserve what they have been given. So it is politics now that will ultimately resolve
I wonder if anyone feels they deserve less.
Well, everyone deserves something more, and the argument always goes back and forth. But it will seem as if what you're saying and the consensus that we can't help here is that the social contract, the interests of the people, cannot be considered first amid all of these interests.
No, the social contract is not jeopardized at all. The social contract is that all the people are part of the polity. All the people have voted. But we are practicing representative democracy. not all the people can be in government. So only a few people have been chosen. And out of these few people that have been chosen to go to the National Assembly, for instance, a fewer number again will be chosen to preside over the activities of the National Assembly. It is like a pyramid. As we are moving from voting, we are the apex. I mean, we are the base. And as you are moving on the pyramid, you are thinning out until you get to the apex, where maybe only one person will be there. So, because you are thinning out, some people are losing out. And those people who are losing out feel that they should not lose out at that level, until they get to the apex. People who are losing out.
The key word here is representative democracy.
Yeah, representative.
Do you see the interests of the people in consideration as the horse trading is ongoing about who becomes what in the 10th Assembly?
I don't think you are getting the politics part of it. You are looking at just the governance part of it. And I've told you that you cannot look at governance without looking at politics first. You can't talk about the interests of the people without talking about the necessary politics that will lead us to the apex of this pyramid we are talking about.
The problem, Dr. Here is my point. Yeah. My apologies, Bukola. Yeah. A good number of people are complaining about politicians. Yeah. A good number of people believe that politicians only want more for themselves. Yeah. A good number of people believe that in the lawmaking, in representation, in the horse trading, is in the lobbying and everything, it is first of all the individual interests. Even politicians have come on this program to tell us that their personal interests come before that of their communities. Yeah. So isn't that the problem? I mean, going by what the question Bukola asked you.
Yeah, well, it is a problem, and it is always going to be there, because for as long as everybody will not give what they want, there will be complaints. But the people are the most short-changed. That is also what I'm saying. These people we talk about, these people who are complaining about politics, they can't complain about politics in a democracy, because democracy is about politics and politics is about democracy. For now, the best form of politics we can play is democratic politics. And democratic politics means, for instance, that there will be representation. Everybody cannot be accommodated. I'm just giving you the structural vision of what we are doing. We are moving in a pyramid. From the base, everybody is there, and all of us have voted. But as we move from the base towards the apex, which in this case is the Senate presidency, for instance, or the speakership of the House, the pyramid is thinning out, so that people are being dropped by the wayside until you get to that place where only maybe one person will hold a position. Because people are thinning out. Those people who are being dropped will naturally complain.
Well, we're back at the same place. The interest first before we get to the people.
The interest.
So, as the elections, come closer now, and, the inauguration of the 10th National Assembly stares us in the face, what would you consider to be the greatest task before this current next set of leadership? One of the things that has, stuck out in our conversation today as being the debt that will be inherited by the incoming administration. So how do you recommend that the 10th Assembly handle it?
The 10th Assembly has this function cut out completely by the Constitution, which is lawmaking. Are you getting me? So this aspect of debt, aspect of development, every aspect of governance, the National Assembly is going to be in charge of the lawmaking part of it. And they are going to do it. At the end, we will know whether they have done it well or not. By the number of bills, by the number of areas they have covered, by the number of developmental strides they have supported and initiated and all that. So their duty is very well cut out. They must not leave legislation to any other duty.
But you haven't really spoken to her question. She's spoken about the debt. For instance, I mean, we know that even from our previous conversations today, 77 trillion is the debt we owe as at now. Now, for instance, there is an $800 million loan that is being proposed from the World Bank that a letter has been sent to the National Assembly to the effect of. Do you think how should the 10th Assembly handle that case? Do you think they should take the loan or approve the loan? Because without their approval, the executive cannot take it.
Their own function here is legislation. I mean, either approve. I mean, taking decision to approve the loan or not to approve the loan. And I am saying that in doing their functions, even like just for the example, all of them are going to be bound by their own outlook for governance and everything. If, for instance, it is development, that is their outlook, then all the laws they are going to make will be laws that will lead us to development. For instance, if they feel, and I'm not going to speak for them because, as I said, they are accomplished people, and the people have rightly given them the mandate to go and do it. They will look at all the issues on ground. They may not look at it from the sentiments that we express from outside the parliament. But by the time, and they have the processes, they have the procedures to look at it comprehensively. By the time they look at all these issues comprehensively and they decide that it is in the interest of Nigeria to approve that the executive takes the loan or whatever loan, then we expect that they will do the necessary thing. If, for instance, they look at the issues and find out that this loan is not in the interest of their overall view of governance, in terms of development, in terms of whatever, then we expect that they will say, we are not going to approve this or any other thing.
Perhaps that question should come in a more specific manner. If we look at, that loan now, for instance, and look at, the Fiscal Responsibility Act in relation to perhaps future borrowings for appropriation bills, do you think that this 10th Assembly has the spine, the grit to stand up to the executive to say that no, we cannot afford to take this loan at this time. We cannot afford further borrowings?
Wait, maybe I will be disappointing you because I'm not being specific, mentioning figures and all that. But it is in the nature of the correct answers to the questions you are asking that we cannot sit here and be talking about whether they should take loan or not loans. And we cannot even be talking about whether they have the spine or not. We have already voted for these people, and they are going to stay there for 4 years. And the people have the ultimate responsibility, ultimate vision, ultimate assessment of who to vote for. And in that wisdom, they have voted for these people. Whether they have the spine or not is a secondary matter. They are now going to do that duty. And they are going to do it by considering all the issues involved. They will look at it. It's not just these loans. It's not just debt. It is about so many other things in governance. And they are going to look at it in the wisdom of the issues at stake, and then they will take the correct decisions.
One can only hope. There are too many questions to ask you, Dr. Ona, but we're completely out of time right now. We have to thank you very much for your time, for being a part of our program. Dr. Emmanuel Ona is Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, some of your reactions have already started to come in. This one is from Michael Ateniola, and he says, every time they talk about agriculture, the first thing this administration loves mentioning is rice production. You claim to have achieved sufficient production of food, yet Nigerians do not see food to eat. The available food in the market are beyond the reach of the poor. High prices every day.
Well, this one is from Honorable Ademola Alalade, and it's quite simple. He says, the President of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, has done his utmost best for the country in fighting corruption and insecurity. Another administration will be taking over in a few weeks, and Nigerians will be expecting a better representation and governance.
And we have this one from David Otaigwe, who says, the developed world started building the infrastructure over time. What is the historical fact of this infrastructure development vis-a-vis debt burden? If I'm not wrong, America is the highest debtor in the world today. I am in agreement with Mr. Oluwade's disdain for stealing by government officials, both elected and appointment. Infrastructure development must continue alongside making provisions for a quality life for the people. That's from David Otaigwe.
And the next one is from Henry Okeke, and Henry says, task before the governors, says the success or failure of every administration depends on the working team assembled by the leader, that is the governor. Therefore, the imperative task before the governors is the assemblage of content-based teams, driven by passion for public service, experience, and creativity. That's from Henry Okeke.
Well, I wish that's all drove it all the time. But look at this last one from Henry Awunonu, who says, governance is not easy, quickly look at, but achievable. Sustainable development is measurable, and there are several indications to achieve that. Just that we've chosen to remain intellectually stunted to think that commissioning a white elephant project with masquerades is it. Oh, that's what Henry Awunonu has to say.
Sometimes the feedback from you can be blunt and hard, but thank you for sending them in. We really do appreciate all the feedback. Unfortunately, we can't take every mail or tweet that has been sent. We want to thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. I'm Neo Taigbe.
Thank you for watching. I'm Malwell Yusuf.
Well, the shades of opinion in all of your feedback is unmistakable, and that's the beauty of democracy. Thank you for allowing us to share your morning with you, and we promise to return again same time tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka.
And if you want more of those messages, just go to our Twitter handle. So much more there. Sunrise Daily Now. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.